This is Randall Root, and in this video we're going to take a look at working with calculated members, MDX programming. So in my book I talk about how calculated members can be created with your code using the with statement, and I give an example here of going through and creating a little test calculated member using the with member, identifying the measures, and then putting the code together. If I go over here and look at it in the query window, we'll see that this code should run just fine. Oops, I got to highlight the right code. There we go. And yeah, I get some results. You could, of course, do calculated values, some kind of expression here instead of just a hard-coded value. It's kind of interesting that they use double quotes instead of single quotes. And you know, you would think that this SQL language, use a single quote. You would think that double quotes would, be optional and single quotes would work, but no, this is a completely different language, and so it fails on that. The syntax is kind of weird. The error is kind of weird. So syntax was an error at the word data is incorrect. Well, you would think it would like be at the start of the word, but whatever. The MDX the error messages in Management Studio for MDX guys is just not all that great. So you just have to live with it. After a while, you get kind of used to it, and usually you just kind of figure it out. Another thing is that in any expression, you know how you use the parentheses to indicate the order of precedence. So if I were going to go through and say, okay, I want to add 5 and 7 first, and then add 7, well, the parentheses would indicate the order of precedence. When using parentheses around an expression, that's all that's happening. And of course, in addition, it makes no difference. But if you were doing multiplication, it would have an impact because normally multiplication, the operator has first precedence over addition, the additive operator. And so the parentheses, make an important difference. Anyway, because it can be confusing for folks, they see all these curly braces and parentheses all the time. You might, think that the curly braces are used to group a set of statements in your membership clause. So, like in a C-style language, like Python or JavaScript or Java or C Sharp, etc. But that's not the case. A couple of curly braces will cause an error, so you're not actually indicating the beginning and ending of the code with the curly braces. You'll get an error message. And as you can see, the error message isn't all that useful to you. I think this is weird. I used a single single quote on that string, and it gave me an error message. And yet, if I go through and use single quotes on an expression, that works. Okay. And so what's going to happen is you're going to see occasionally people will kind of preface their and end their code. Preface here they'll put like a single tick, single quote right there, and then put whatever expression they want in the middle. Uh, Basically, kind of like the curly braces. But I don't know. That syntax just seems way too weird to me. I put the spaces there so it'd be really obvious in the book. But yeah, that's odd. It's a weird language. Another thing you should know is that when you're creating a calculated member with the with clause here, it's only good for the life of the batch. I'm trying to run it without the select part. It doesn't work, and I'm going to go ahead and try this one too. And oddly enough, it works, but not well. The problem is that you don't really get any error messages. It says cell set consists of one row and one column. Well, kind of. The problem is there's no data in there. I'm really kind of surprised that it gives me a blank. And the reason for that is this query, this member is no longer available. It's out of scope. again, you would think that if I did something like this, it would give you an error message saying, hey, that thing doesn't exist. But it doesn't. I could just make up anything and it'll still give me the same thing. So there's another thing I didn't talk about in the book, but you probably should know. It's possible to go through and create a member that is persistent either as part of the definition of the cube or for the session. If I go through the help files, I can kind of find this out. So if I like highlight that code, hit F1, it should bring up Microsoft's help. Eventually. And then, you do have to do some searching, etc. It's not as good as the standard SQL help, but it's still something, you know. When you finally find the stuff on calculated members, you'll see that they're divided into two categories: query scoped, that's the one we've been doing with the with keyword, and then session scope, and that's what I want to talk about right now with the create member statement. And clicking on the link, of course, will bring me over to that. Now, the ones that you make in the editing window, when you're in Visual Studio and you make a calculated member there, that persists as part of the cube's definition. So if you want to make one that's persistent throughout the life of the cube, or until you drop it, you can go ahead and use the Visual Studio editing tool to do it. You can also, of course, do it in MDX. But if you want one that's going to last just for the current session, you use this syntax. Here's an example. So I'll make myself a little room and I'll put it side by side so that I can, adjust my code and make it work like theirs. So according to this, let's see, create session member. Okay, create session member. And then it's the store. Let's see, what is that? Is that the dimension? No, actually it measures the dimension. That is the name of their cube. So it's a store cube. In fact, if I go ahead and try to run this code as it is, I get an error message saying that the dim dates cube does not exist. So what they're looking for is they actually want the cube name over here, and then I can make it up. And now that that's been added to that dimension, I can select on it as long as the session's alive. If I, on the other hand, disconnect and then reconnect, it'll disappear from scope. It's no longer alive, and I'm back to getting nothing. So the create session member allows you to create a definition for a calculated member that's good for the life of that connection. The with member is only good for the life of a particular batch of code that you're running. One thing that's kind of weird is the with member, if you have the name of the database in there, it's going to complain. It's only you take off the name of the database, whereas if you're doing the create session, you have to have the name of the database. MDX is not always all that consistent. And what can you do? So hopefully that makes sense about what the calculated member is. And a couple things to note is that we use them in KPIs all the time. We use them, of course, in three different ways. We use them for creating calculated members are good for the life of the batch, calculated members that are good for a session, and calculated members that are a part of the cube's definition, which are persistent. So three different types of calculated members. And remember that a derived member is where you actually pull the data from the source using standard SQL code. Calculated members use MDX code. And neither one is actually better than the other. The most important thing is make sure you get the answers that correctly that you want. Refer to the chapter on this for more. Anyway, next up, we're going to be taking a look at, actually, let's see here, member properties and functions. That's our next stop. I'll see you in that video.